All right, thank you everybody for being here. We're going to get started in a little bit. We're just going to wait for the rest of the attendees to log in. So just be patient with us. Okay, it looks like almost everyone is logged in. And so in an effort to make this a true lunch and learn, I want to get started. Um, Thank you so much for joining the Florida Association of Museums Lunch and Learn webinar series, The Fundamentals of Fundraising. Our partner is Catalyst Consulting Services and Michelle Turman, and we're very happy to have her here to present a fantastic new program for us. Let me share my screen with you because there's a few housekeeping items I want to go through with you. This webinar is part of a 4-part series, so we hope that you'll check out some of the other ones we have upcoming in May, June, and July. We have one on earned income, one on fundraising boards, and we invite you to invite your board members to sit along with you in that one. And then on advocacy with Melinda Horton, who is here with us for just briefly today. Melinda, I wanted to introduce you and see if you had anything you wanted to say. Welcome to everybody.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for taking time out. I know everyone has very busy schedules and we appreciate you joining us today. I also have to thank Michelle Turman for being such a great supporter of FAM and always jumping in and helping us. We're always looking forward to new ideas. So if you guys have ideas after this is over, suggestions, we always are open for any type of positive criticism. And just let us know, follow up, and I just thank you all for being part of FAM and for participating in our organization.
Thank you, Melinda. My name is Carmen Godwin. I'm the FAM program manager. Just to go over quickly, this is going to be a presentation style. If you have questions, please use the little chat box. I will keep an eye on the chat box and make sure that your questions are answered. And we will also have a Q&A at the end. So, but feel free to put the questions in as we go along, as they come up. This webinar will be recorded. There are some handouts available. I'll let Michelle talk to you about those when she gets to that point. But there is a handout section, and she has generously shared 3 different handouts that you can print out on your own, and you can download them now while the webinar is open. We also have a poll, and I'm about to launch that now. The poll is asking what your annual budget is. So I just put up a quick poll. If you don't mind going ahead and answering your annual budget, we will share that with Michelle so that she'll have an idea of the size organizations that we have on the webinar today. Okay, I'm going to leave it open for just a few more seconds if everybody can go ahead and respond. At this point, it looks like we have about 63% of those online are in the $300,000 to $750,000 budget range. And then we have about 13% under 300 and 25% over 1.5 million. Michelle, I don't know if that, I wanted to give you that information, and I'll type that into the chat box as well so everybody has that information.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, also, I will be emailing a survey afterwards so that everybody can provide feedback. This is a great way for us to know what you thought about the program and also give us ideas for programs in the future. I want to thank our partners, Visit Florida and Cultural Bills Florida, which is Florida Department of State Division of Cultural Affairs. So Michelle Turman with Catalyst Consulting, she has raised over $60 million since 1998 for nonprofits throughout the Southeast. And she has many, many years of experience in a museum administration, programming, and capital campaign projects, which makes her a really vital consultant for organizations like ours. And I'm going to change the presentation over to Michelle so that she can share her expertise with you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you, Carmen. Thank you, Melinda, for inviting me to participate in this series. It is great to be able to share some time with just individuals I admire serving this profession. I have been in nonprofit over 27 years, but 17 of those years were in administration. And so it's really amazing to see sort of the breakdown of the budgets that we have on the phone, because I can honestly say that I have worked in each of those divisions. In fact, today is a huge day for me. I'm going to be voted in by our county commissioners for a new initiative here for cultural arts. We have formed a cultural arts commission, and we'll be giving out, starting this year, $1 million this year, as well as we're going to start fundraising to fill that gap for the state funding that we receive. So not only have I been in your shoes and trying to create some sustainability within the organization, I've been somebody that reviews grants at the state level and also providing money here locally. So one of the things that I always see is, what is the organization doing to be sustainable? And unfortunately, many organizations rely so much on the state funding that they're not adequately preparing themselves if there is a drop in that funding. And so today is really meant to be something that is the basic fundamentals, depending on where you're at with your organization. So I want to just be very clear on what we're going to try to accomplish today. Our goals today, number one, we're going to determine the types of income streams that's going to garner the best rate of return based on your staffing model. And so every organization is in a different place in its life cycle. So some of the things we're going to talk about today may not be appropriate for you depending where your organization is at, how your infrastructure is set up, but really creating this sort of base of a foundation for you to build upon versus sort of that shotgun fundraising approach that we see quite a bit. Secondly, we're going to actually give you a development plan sample. Some of you may have been tasked with creating a fundraising plan. You may not know what that's supposed to look like. You may not know what's supposed to be in there. And I can honestly have seen many plans. I've developed plans for our clients, but I think it's important to see, what does your plan look like? So I wanted to give you some basic guideline that you can use today, that you can augment for your organization. I personally don't like to attend educational series unless I have a takeaway that I can actually use. So hopefully this will be helpful. And the last piece is how we can engage board members in fundraising activities. And I know that there might be some people on this call that say, our board is not a fundraising board. That's okay. What I would tell you is that all boards at some point have to fundraise, and there are things they can do that are not necessarily about making the asks that I'd like to share with you today and invite them to be part of the process. I share that because I've also seen when an organization has a dip in funding, that all of a sudden there's something that forces the organization, the staff, and the board to maybe readdress the type of board they have. So depending on what end of the spectrum you are in that, I do believe you'll have some takeaways today that you can slowly start to integrate without even the board members realizing that they're really creating a culture of philanthropy, even without making that ask. So I want to talk a little bit about where you're at in your life cycle of the organization. This is sort of, the circle, if you will. There's the startup, development, expansion, growth, maturity, restructuring, or are you in the decline and closing? And so I'm actually going to go ahead and open up our first handout.
Hey, Michelle, this is Carmen.
Yes, ma'am.
I do not see your screen.
You can't see my screen? Oh my goodness. How about that?
There we go.
Okay, all right. Were you able to see the slides I was referring to? There we go.
There we go.
All right.
Thank you.
So I share this, I share this resource with you, and I will tell you that this is one I give out. We work with a lot of different nonprofits, about 80 in the Southeast, and this is one I give out not only when it comes to fundraising, but strategic planning. It's a great tool for even executive directors that are trying to figure out what the needs might be in their life cycle. But today we're going to talk about it in the context of fundraising. So this is basically what every nonprofit would go through. It doesn't matter what type of nonprofit you have. So these are basically the stages. It gives you sort of a bullet point description of what happens in those phases and the types of leadership skills needed. And let me clarify, leadership can be the board, leadership can be the CEO, but leadership can also be your staff or your management team. And this is a really great handout. It's not my idea, clearly I cited the source, but I find this is really amazing because when you're going into budget time, when you're going into strategic planning, when we're having discussions about fundraising, there is appropriate metrics, if you will. There's appropriate streams of fundraising that match up with where you're at in your organizational life cycle. And we're going to talk about what that means. But, I want to get an idea from you all at some point today, maybe in the chat room, where you're at in your organizational life cycle. If you can share that with me so that when we get to the point of talking about the development plan, I can mirror that and share with you where you might want to consider yourself. So we will also have organizations on this call potentially that they're in a mixture. And typically where we see the mixture is if they're in the development or the expansion and growth. So you don't necessarily need to fit just in one area. You might have a mixture between the two. And I also have worked with organizations that, they're in some significant crisis, quite frankly. Maybe they've had a drop in funding. They're in that crisis and restructuring. I've merged museums. I've had to close a museum. We just recently merged Polk County Museum with a local college in Lakeland. Many of you may go back into the day where even the Ringling had to merge with Florida State as a mode of survival, quite frankly. So a lot of these things are realistic, these phases are realistic, but I share it with you from the standpoint of when you're talking about how you're going to raise money, do you have the capacity? Do you have the staff capacity? Do you have the tools that you need? Whether that is a CRM system, for example, like Razor's Edge or Bloomerang or whatever you're looking at to manage those donors, do you have the infrastructure in place to be successful? That's huge. So I really wanted to share this with you as you sort of take this journey with me today. I thought we would start just by sharing what the national giving by source is. And if you get the opportunity, maybe it's you, maybe it's your finance director, but I challenge you to see if you can even garner the information for your organization. Some can, some can't. But this is sort of the national standard. And I share this with you because not much has changed when it comes to the piece of the pie, if you will, that individuals make up in terms of giving. I share this because, and I say this as your biggest fan if you are a fundraiser or put in this role, or a percentage of your time is in fundraising, that it happens a lot where the first question is, how are we going to raise money? And it's, we're going to put on an event, right? And what I want to share with you is there's a reason why this pie chart hasn't changed. That most transformational gifts come from individuals, period. The individuals are where you want to truly figure out how to spend the bulk of your time cultivating and stewarding. It's no different if you're in your membership for your organization, because they'll upgrade, will increase their role. The same can be said in fundraising. It's the individuals who make the major gifts. It's the individuals who will leave you in your estate. It is those that will take the longest journey and invest with your organization. And so you will absolutely see the return if you build a fundraising program built around individuals. Corporations, I want to be clear, that typically can be your special events area. It could also be if you do have corporate funders that are giving to you, and I'm not necessarily talking about in kind here, I'm talking about dollars. And then foundations, you know, if you have grants that you're writing, this might include state money, for example. This might include money maybe you're getting from your local arts council, and then bequest, that is truly any type of legacy type of giving. What I will tell you that is I've seen pie charts where the corporations is a huge piece of the pie. That typically will tell me you're doing a lot of special event fundraising. If you have a significant piece of the pie that's foundations, for example, that might mean that you are significantly funded by maybe the state or some type of local mechanism like an arts council or cultural affairs division. Where I see people having the smallest piece of the pie is bequest, because I think a lot of development programs feel they don't really have the bandwidth to do this. And I will tell you that until you get to that area where you can be having more sophisticated type of fundraising program, anybody can just plant the seed for bequests, even if it is just something as simple as remember us in your will, on your donate page, or in your materials. So you should always be planting those seeds when it comes to bequest, and finding board members that might assist you administratively if that happens, whether it's a certified financial planner or an attorney that deals with estates and trusts. It is not something that you necessarily need to have a doctorate to understand. You tend to see this more in the university setting, for example, or art organizations within a university setting, like maybe Florida State. But don't think for 1 minute that by planting the seed, it will take you very far. So everything we talk about today is going to be about how do we really reach that individual, since they'll have the greatest impact. You may have seen this before, maybe you haven't seen this before, but along the lines of what I was sharing with you, this is the giving pyramid. These are time and truth fundraising strategies that, depending on where you're at in your organizational life cycle, a lot of organizations will have. Now, I want to sort of take a pause here. Having been working with cultural organizations, there is a thought that because we're membership based, whether it is art, whether you work for an aquarium and working with a collection of fish, whether you work with the zoo and a collection of animals, there's something to be said. And one challenge we always have within those organizations is they believe that having membership is equal to fundraising. And I'm here to tell you it is not the same. Membership will fill a gap in your operational budget, but that's not fundraising. It is transactional. The key is, how do you take those members that are invested? It's a quid pro quo. I pay you for a membership, you get certain benefits. How do you take those members and move them more into different types of fundraising strategies. So for those of you that are not familiar what those strategies might be, we consider a first-time donor that comes through the way of, and let's say membership could be one, but direct mail, fundraising benefit if you do have a special event, telemarketing, and yes, people still do that, whether it's at election time. The YMCA still does telemarketing. There's phone-a-thons, as you are well aware. The internet, if you're doing any type of crowd fundraising on Facebook and social media, that's still a first-time donor. Or door-to-door, right? So the Girl Scouts, there's many that still do door-to-door fundraising. That's your first-time donor. And how are you taking that first-time donor and moving them up your pyramid? So I want to talk to you that are doing special events as a perfect example. I have to self-admit I am not a big special events fan, but because I see them being misused. I do believe special events are a mechanism to bring people closer to the organization. So it's a great introduction. Hopefully you're having them within your organization so they can see what you do. If not, please make sure when you're having a special event that there's a mechanism to follow up to get them to your organization. But the proof is in the pudding is what happens after that event. Are you just sending the tax letter? Are you having 3 touches a year to get them to visit your organization, become a volunteer, see maybe a behind the scenes uncrating of an artwork, a behind the scenes tour? What's the mechanism for moving your first time donor to the next level in the pyramid? So the next level in the pyramid is renewed or upgraded donor, right? And that's going to only happen through personal contact, a letter, or a phone call. So you probably do this with your membership drive and you don't even know it, or certain segments of your members, but I challenge you to do the same thing with your first time donor. You don't have to have separate cultivation plans, as we would call them, or stewardship, we could also use that, but you need to start thinking about integrating the two. Work smarter, not harder. So how do you take that member? How do you take that special event donor? And how do you have 3 touches at a minimum? Large organizations beyond that $1.5 million, if you go to university, they have 6 to 7 touches a year. And what I would qualify as a touch is a tour. It's an experience, the opportunity to volunteer. Maybe it's an opportunity to come and hear a particular speaker. Don't be afraid to take a benefit that might be shared for a different membership level and use that as a way to entice people to become a member at a different level, or to use that as a way to get people involved from a special event. What will happen as you start to take that first time donor and you upgrade them? They're going to start to give more. Why? Because you're touching them throughout the year. They will eventually become a special or major gift donor. You will be asking them for larger gifts. Now, a major gift for each of you on this call, because we have from 300,000 to 1.5 million, could be different across the board. If you have a $300,000 budget, you might say to me, Michelle, $5,000 is a huge major gift for us. It absolutely is. If you're 1.5 million, you might say, well, 15,000 is a major gift. So how you qualify that is really important. If you'd like to know how to do that, I encourage you to go into your database, or even if that's an Excel spreadsheet at this point, and see what your average donation is per donor. That will give you an idea of what the average gift is and where they fall. What I will tell you about this level, it really requires personal contact, one-on-one, even peer-to-peer fundraising. Maybe getting your board involved, for example. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But these types of gifts, it's showing the respect that you sit down and say, would you like to invest in this exhibition? Would you like to invest in this educational program? Hopefully by now, through your touches, you've learned, for example, what makes Michelle Turman tick, right? Does she like exhibitions? Does she want the exposure? Does she want to give to children in some types of arts education program, for example? But these types of gifts happen one-on-one. It is not through a mailing. Capital campaign, if you are involved with capital campaign, it is personal contact only, if any of you have been through this. So whether you are building a new organization, whether you're building or renovating, it could even be an endowment campaign you're trying to build. Truly, it is personal contact. And by this point, you have moved that donor up your pyramid. Plan giving is also personal contact only. By this point, you have really brought that donor closer to the organization, potential through some of these strategies. I'll give you a perfect person who would be a plan giving contact. If you have anybody on your board that has had any length of service, they are a plan giving contact. They are a potential person that has chosen to serve, give their time, treasure, and talent to the organization. So any past board members, any current board members, those quite frankly could all be potential plan gift donors, okay? I want to talk a little bit, check my questions here. I want to talk a little bit about the fundraising method effectiveness. All of you have different size organizations, but if you ever get the chance, and I usually challenge people when they're fundraising, the summertime is the best time to look at your fundraising program. It doesn't matter how big or small. Let's even talk about your membership program, right? Because we know in the state of Florida that there's a season to what we do. We usually kick it off in October 1st. It used to be in September, but it's usually October 1st, and it ends the end of May. And so the summertime is a great time to say, what was our rate of return? You know, what did we get out of that special event? What was the effort that gave us the greatest rate of return? So I wanted to sort of share with you some of the standards right now. Why does it matter? It matters to those organizations that are the 300,000, right? You have to figure out where you want to invest your time. You might be a development shop of one person. You might need to outsource some of your development. So understanding the rate of return on these strategies is extremely important. So direct mail, it is pretty costly, okay? But I will tell you that if you are in a small shop, direct mail can be very effective. It can be very effective at looking at maybe 3 different appeals throughout the year. Maybe you start with 2. Maybe you do a holiday appeal. Maybe you do some type of appeal around back to school. And I'm not talking about in kind. I'm talking about if you have an art education program and you need supplies, if you need things to support and sustain that program. If you have a summer program that you want to try to move dollars around, direct mail can be very effective. And so that is one that's somewhat of an anomaly, particularly if you're a small organization, because you can work with a company to actually help you craft that direct mail piece, do all the bulk mailing for you, and all you need, quite frankly, is one, $2,000 donation or $5,000 donation, and it absolutely happens. I've seen it happen a lot. So it's also a great way to invest in get your donor base to be a little bit larger. So direct mail can be very effective. You not only do you have a strategy for that by looking at your current donors or current members, you can actually say to a direct mail company, I want you to give me a mailing list of the wealthiest zip codes in Tallahassee. Maybe it's in Killarney Way, whatever. But, find the wealthiest zip codes and do what we call sort of an investment targeted mailing to see if you can also bring in new donors to the fold. So direct mail strategies, I wouldn't say to be too scared of that expense ratio, okay? It depends on how many people are in your development department and how you can carry that out. Telephone acquisition, telephone renewal, special events, this is the industry standard, okay? So you'll notice that that expense goes down as you start to go up in your strategies in that giving pyramid. Why? Because face-to-face costs less. Peer-to-peer solicitation costs less. You get to know people. So special events is always that sticky wicket. If you're going to look at your special event, first ask yourself, why am I doing this event? What are we trying to accomplish? Make sure it's mission-based. So you need to go back for your special events and do an exercise. What's your rate of return on that special event? And by the way, include staff time. A lot of people don't include that. They include all the expenses, but they don't include the staff time. And the way you get around that is you can go to your finance director or maybe your operations person or maybe the executive director and say, I need the percentage of time for this person's salary. That way it's somewhat confidential. But if you are not including the staff time as part of the expense, you are not getting the true rate of return on the special events. Okay. Let's see. There we go. So I want to shift gears for a minute and talk about building a culture of philanthropy. Building that culture of philanthropy, even if you're not fundraising or have a fundraising board, how can you start to build that now? So let's talk about the board a little bit. Let's talk about strategic recruitment, okay? Strategic recruitment is all about finding the right people. How do you do that? Through a board matrix. If any of you are not utilizing a board matrix to do strategic recruitment, or you're not strategically recruiting people on behalf of your fundraising, this is really important. Finding the right people. It's not rocket science. Finding people that really fit in with your strategic alignment. So if you're building a building, then let's get people on there that can help from the construction aspect. Let's get people on there that's an architect. If you are truly fundraising, do you have community leaders that have a sphere of influence? So your board needs to be one of influence and how you get there. That's extremely important. Development, making sure that you have shared values and creating friends. The biggest challenge I see in this place right here is a perfect example of special events. People will put on a special event, they'll ask the board members to, sponsor a table, and then the board members will bring people there that don't care about the organization. I'm a corporate sponsor and I fill them with employees that don't care. There's no challenge. So how can you change that? Ask them to sponsor a table and bring individuals that would either make a donation or have an interest in the arts. Those are shared values, because if you don't, you will notice if you pull even the last few years of the guest list for your event, you will figure out you're doing transactional fundraising. They're not going to continue to give. They're there because someone else asked them to be there. Maybe they sponsored an event for their organization. So it's really important if you are doing some level of special event that you are coming at it with shared values and doing some type of board training about how they're introducing people to the organization. Are they passionate about the organization? If you have the right people on your board, then you need to explain to them, you need to be bringing people to the opening of an exhibition. You need to be bringing people to events. You need to bring people for tours for your organization that really want to learn about it. And then the real link is then the fundraising. So people will give depending on how you align with their affinity for your organization. And you'll notice that based on the size of their gift. Smaller the gift, the less affinity for the organization, okay? So that's very important to understand as you build this culture of philanthropy, getting the right people, making sure that you have a mechanism to do some training with your board, training with your staff. Who are those prospects? There needs to be some alignment of values. Again, these are all individuals. Individuals will have that impact. And then fundraising, who you're gonna see the biggest increase from, whether it's a corporate gift, a foundation gift, or individuals, will be those that share your values. The one thing I caution if you're working with corporations, the biggest issue that I see with corporations is you're coming to them saying, we can put so many impressions on our website. We're going to give you so many tickets to this event or to this opening. And if you're doing that, I encourage you to switch gears and sit down and talk to them about, here's the menus of opportunities we have. What are you looking to accomplish with your gift? It may be social media exposure, it may not. They might want to have people come volunteer. They might want a private tour of you setting up an exhibition, for example, or behind the tour of the zoo, for example. So I think it's important to think about how you view corporations, because I see more and more corporations not funding nonprofits in general because it's no longer quid pro quo, okay? So how are you adding investment and value to that corporate sponsorship? Let's talk a little bit about your development team. There is the mission, and I'm not, this is very standard slide for strategic planning. But this is your team, your mission. How strong is your mission? Can you recite it in less than 30 seconds? Can every board member memorize it and staff member? Is it impactful? The board, they are part of your development team, whether you fundraise or not. You're going to only be as good as that board. They are your biggest cheerleaders in the community, and they are potential donors and potential planned gift donors. And your staff, does your staff give to the organization? Are they all members of the organization? So no organization is perfect, but there comes a point in time when then people realize we are all in this together. We are all a part of the team. So one thing for you to think about is, what's the weakest part of your team? How can we make it the strongest part next year? And there might be people on this call that say, I don't really have a hand in that. That's the management. You do. Actually, where you answer this question is in your strategic plan process. And if you're not part of that, you should be part of that. You can't operate in a vacuum. You've got to participate in your development plan, your strategic plan, and are these goals realistic? And the board needs to participate. So these are all the people that are part of your development team. They can have significant impact. If the person at your reception desk can't answer how a donation, how a membership can be impactful for that organization, we've got to train that receptionist. That's the first person they see. If the person that answers the phone call can't talk about the impact you're making, we need to give them that training. What they should not be saying is, oh, if you become a member at the $50 level, this is what you get. It's all about impact and what you need and what the mission and the board and the staff need. So to that end, I do want to open up one of our second handouts that you can share. This is sort of a very baseline agreement for board members. We use this in essence to start tipping the scales, to start weeding out the board members. So feel free to use this as a baseline. In fact, every YMCA has this. I'll tell you, I served on the board of the Y. The responsibilities of the board is going to come directly from the bylaws, quite frankly. How you craft the board member responsibilities is up to you. But typically it speaks to the time, treasure, and talent. Some of this will also come from your bylaws. What's the requirement for them to give of their time? Is it a percentage of time to the board meetings? Do they serve on a committee? Usually the biggest point of contention in a board member agreement is what they will give. What's their contribution? In here, I put 1,000, okay, as a baseline. You might need to start for 500. You might need to start with 250. I've even had organizations leave this out and say, what's a meaningful gift to you? But here's what I'll tell you. At some point, as your organization grows, you get to 1.5 million. If you don't have in your mind what is a very basic threshold for board members, and you don't demand, quite frankly, that you're one of their top 3 charities, you're gonna have a problem. I meet a lot of people that serve on, 5 boards, 10 boards. They can't possibly be effective for those organizations. I work with Work Done charities. Many people know who that is. It's a $10,000 minimum to have a seat on that board. But I also work with organizations that they don't even put that amount. But a board member agreement can be a fairly effective tool to start creating a board that has purpose, to start thinking about your board as one that I want to serve on that board, to develop a waiting list. So those responsibilities, I just want to preface, you need to come up with what they would be. If you want them to volunteer, because then they're vested, you can come up with that. I've given you some ideas here in terms of maybe they invite somebody to the fundraising event again to make a gift. Maybe they host somebody. Maybe they have you come into their business. They can't bring their company there. Maybe you come, talk about your organization and give them all free passes. One of the most effective tools I've ever seen for a board member, and we did this at the YMCA, for example, was we had board members actually pay for their own business card. And on the back of the business card, it was one free pass to the Y for the day. They could swim, they could work out. What if you gave your board members, or they paid for, a small stack of cards, and on the reverse of that card was a free pass for a day at your organization? That way you could directly link that success to the board member. They're out there. They are raising awareness about your organization, and it's quantifiable. So I wanted to just sort of share with you a potential agreement that you could use. I recommend that if you do this every year, so the board member recommits. It is part of their board record, and that way the board chair can come out and say, we have 100% board participation. We have 100% board giving. You don't call out what they give, but this matters when it comes to writing grants. It matters to be able to make sure that the board member on the left to you and the board member to the right of you is equally vested, because nothing will kill a board morale faster is if you have some people on the board that are extremely committed and some that aren't. So how you come up with those responsibilities, it's really up to you. This is just somewhat of an idea, and have them recommit at the beginning of every year. I want to switch back to what the donor must have. Again, a donor, a member, if we want to talk about it as a member, they need to have linkage. They need to have some type of passion about your organization. They need to have the ability. So if you have people that are doing a special event and they're inviting people to the table, they need to have the ability to give, and they need to have interest. So how do you gauge this? It's that cultivation. It's the touches throughout the year. So I challenge you to think about, how are you soliciting people? And let's talk about that. Solicitation could be membership. So solicitation could be for a special event. It could be for a capital campaign. Each of you are in probably a different space. But are you soliciting people with linkage ability, but no interest? And how are you measuring that? That's a little bit sophisticated. Probably more the $1.5 million organization. How do you measure that? Quite frankly, it's through a wealth screening. You have to purchase that separately with Razor's Edge. If you use Bloomerang, it's built in. There's also companies that can do this for you. And what I mean by that is you can actually upload your donors from your CRM software, and you can actually get a wealth screening of your donors for the information you don't know. And it's based on public record. It's based on the census, on the home value of their home. It's based on public gifts that they make. These are how capital campaigns get done. So when we say measuring ability, there's two ways to measure ability. You can do a wealth screening, but you can also look in your database and say, for example, how much has Michelle Turman given? What has she given to? It talks a little bit about my passion. How do you quantify me as a donor? Okay. And how are you creating interest? All right. So this actually leads us to sort of the next handout, if you will, which I want to bring up on the screen, which is your development plan. This is a sample. You can change it any way you want. You can go online and you will find tons of development plans, but I wanted to make this very simple. We write these all day long for organizations. This is a very basic plan, so I want to preface that. But it covers everything that you would need to do if you've never done a development plan. This should be part of your strategic plan. If it's not, then that causes me pause. Then you're basically being dictated to fill a hole in the budget. That is transactional fundraising. That's not relational fundraising, and that will come out in the wash. So this is an example of just basic things in a plan. And as you become more sophisticated, as your fundraising plan grows, as you move people up that pyramid, this will change. So you should be having your own annual budget. You should be having projected revenue goals. I've given you just some examples here, but you got to get down to the nitty-gritty. If you don't do this, then you will have, and I say this respectfully from being a CEO, but also being a development director, you will have somebody dictating to you what your goals are. And unfortunately, that's where we see turnover in fundraising staff. So you need to understand your events. You need to understand what works, what doesn't, how you're going to measure it, and what's the true capacity that you're going to raise. So I've actually, if you go through this, you will see I've given you some ideas of what that direct mail should look like, potential themes, potential goals, how the board members fit in, which we'll talk about in a minute. So whether you write grants, whether you do special events, if you do plan giving, I'm giving you some ideas of what that should be. These are called SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound. Okay, you can't do all of this, you know, throughout the entire year. So when you create a plan, it's what you do through those 12 months that's going to raise that money. You may also have a section in there, quite frankly, that's about communications or marketing. Try not to get too bogged down in there. Why anything that is not raising money is taking you away from sustaining the organization. But it does happen with the smaller organizations. Some of the things that I call a squirrel, if you've ever, you know, see the movie Up, where you have the dog squirrel. The things that really are time sucks for raising money is managing volunteers, marketing and communications. So you will get to a point where you can say, you know, we really need somebody to handle this, or maybe we outsource it, because those things will take time and energy away from raising the needed money to implement your program. So I definitely wanted to give you somewhat of a sample of what a typical development plan should look like. Quite frankly, this should be matching your strategic plan. Everything in this plan also includes stewardship, how you recruit development committee members if you want to have your own committee that you can manage. We talked a little about stewardship. This is what stewardship looks like. Who are your top 100 donors or top members, let's say? What do your touches look like? So I've given you some examples about what this looks like. But your development plan should have in there how you're going to steward the donors, how you're going to communicate to the donors, what are your methods of fundraising, what's the budget look like, what are your revenue goals. So I challenge you, whether you use my plan or someone else's, to really start working on a development plan. This leads to less turnover, more clarity within your supervisor and within your team as to what you can do and what you can't do. So that if it comes down to we have to cut something, you truly know what it is that is the capacity of that development program. Lastly, I just want to talk a little bit about what board member activities and what they can do. These are things that don't require money. They can make a personal contribution. That they should be doing that anyway. And maybe that's just in the way of membership right now. But they should be making a personal contribution. I've also seen people refer to it as a give or get. Maybe they're doing a company match, but they at minimum should be a member of your organization. I've seen board members that are not members. That tells you right there they're not vested. They could write thank you notes. Does every board member get some stationery from you, or maybe have some cards made up so that they can write handwritten notes to the people that attended the special event on their behalf or per their invitation? They'll get the tax acknowledgement from the staff. But how are you empowering your board members to write a simple thank you note, or taking a tour, coming to an event? Invite them to be part of the strategic planning process. They might provide prospective donor information, okay? Maybe if you're going through a capital campaign and you're doing a wealth screening or a rating process, they might provide that to you. They could add names to mailing lists. Make it easy for them. If you're doing a special event, for example, we'll be happy to mail to them. It's not the same as a personal connection, but it's something that's very easy that their assistant or their secretary can send you. This one takes a little bit of time. If you do direct mail, any personal solicitation, and you really know who your top donors are, it requires a little bit of planning, but they can also write notes on solicitation letters. I've seen this done with grants. Share your grant plan with your board members. Do they know any of the board members on these grants? Can they send a letter of support? Can they send a letter for a particular state letter of support? So these are just some ideas I wanted to put together. They can also go on a call with the executive director. They can cultivate relationships with a potential donor as your development program gets more sophisticated. It takes time. It just takes time. And you can build this into that agreement. Just a couple things to remember, because I definitely wanted to sort of leave some time for questions. It doesn't matter if you are in that $300,000 budget or the $1.5 million budget. I want you to be efficient in how you create sustainability. The number one reason people don't give is they aren't asked. I've seen it done at events, but I've also seen it done on one-on-one fundraising. At what point are you going to ask the individual to make an investment? Okay. I have served on organizations and been ready to give. I've served as a board member. I've served as a committee member. I give money every year, and they never ask me for a larger gift. And I've stopped giving. So all they can do is say no. Okay. Involvement invites investment. If they're coming once a year to something, that's not investment. So how are you creating the investment? The board has got to be the role model for giving behavior. If they are, quite frankly, inviting duds to your special event, we got to get them trained, okay? So if they're not bringing a guest every time to an opening or for a special event, we got to talk about that. But they're the role model. All fundraising is local. Before you invest, for example, in building out your direct mail list, or before you look at donors outside or a grant that's not local, it's all local. Start in your background first. And you seldom get more than you ask for. So this is where it really comes into play of understanding the complexion of the donor. If I started out being a member at $25, I increased that. I then started to give money at the special event, or I've given you a major gift, then you need to be asking for what is comparable to my giving history. So I cannot impress upon you, you cannot raise money without a CRM system. So find a way to get that investment. Fundraising is about building and maintaining relationships. That's why in that development plan I gave you, that cultivation and stewardship plan is so important. It's very important. That's what gets you to those larger gifts. And it's easier to get more money from an existing donor than just somebody that passes through, okay? So everybody has those people on their list. You think about your community. There's that name that everybody knows and everybody wants to get you. Look within your own donor base, look within your own membership donor base, and look at who's currently giving. They're the ones that are vested. Work on a plan to bring them closer to the organization. And finally, these are just some 10 steps to building that fundraising plan. You need to know who's going to be in charge. Who is the one person? Who's going to outline your goals and objectives or create that development plan? Research and study your past donor giving history. If you can't do this, again, invest in that CRM system. You've got to be able to demonstrate and pull reports and fight for who your top 100 donors are and understand their giving patterns. You cannot have a capital campaign without that. Identify your fundraising channels and methods that you can realistically do. So it goes back to that organizational life cycle. How big's your staff? What do you need to outsource? What can you outsource? What's appropriate? Develop that case for support that talks about your impact. That's not telling me about your exhibitions or your programs. Tell me the difference they're making in the community. How many lives have been touched? What's the true impact you're making? Develop a calendar. You need to know what everybody's doing so you're not leading to donor fatigue. So put out a communication calendar. When are we doing social media? When are we sending e-newsletters? When are we sending holiday cards or thank you, Thanksgiving cards? Let's look at those touches and put them on one master calendar. Work smarter, not harder. Make sure it's on a shared drive, whether it's Outlook or Google. And definitely execute your fundraising plan. Don't just write it and put it on a shelf. That should be driving every development committee meeting, any staff meeting. What are you doing and what are you accomplishing? What's not working? What should we stop doing? And then stewardship. It's what holds it together. If you've never been thanked for a donation, you know what I'm talking about. Tax letter's one thing. And the best example I've had is Meals on Wheels. I made a $25 gift to them. Not only did I get a call 2 days later from the development director, I got a tax letter. I also got a card from a volunteer. Stewardship is what brings people closer to the organization. And then monitoring and reviewing your plan. Every year, knowing what's working, what's not working, and being able to say, we're not going to do that anymore. We're not seeing the investment. So I'm going to take a pause because I know we have just about 10 minutes and see if we have any questions.
This is Carmen, guys. If you want to type your questions into the chat box, or you can Alternatively, raise your hand. There's a little button that should have like a little hand on it. Looks like it's waving. If you want to press that, I can unmute you and you can, we can talk. So
I see a hand.
yeah, Diane Johnson would like to ask a question. So I'm going to unmute you, Diane. Go
Hey,
ahead.
Diane.
Diane?
I wonder if she has her microphone on.
Yeah. Diane, if you we can't hear you. So if your microphone's not on, either turn that on or you can type a message or a question in either the question or message box, chat box, and we can answer that for you.
I've also put up my information that if you don't think anything now, or maybe wanted to not do it publicly, I have no problem just reaching out to me. I've got lots of different resources on my website and different tools that you can feel free to take a look at, different blogs and articles I've written that might be pertinent for something you want to see. So please also feel free. I didn't want to, you know, keep you pigeonholed just the hour as well.
Okay, so as I'm waiting, I'll wait a few more minutes, see if anybody does have any questions. I did want to remind everybody to please go ahead. The handouts are available now. You can download them directly from the control panel. And you can do that while you're on the webinar. So I would encourage you to go ahead and download those now. If there is an issue, I'm happy to send them to you later. And then also we will be sending out a survey. And if you have additional questions, as Michelle said, her contact information is up on the screen right now. Or, you know, you can always reach out to me. My email is Carmen, C-A-R-M-E-N, at flamuseums.org. I do not see anybody frantically waving their hand, and I don't see any questions in the chat box at this time. So, oh wait, all right, we do have one question. Mike Thorson. I'm gonna.
Hey, Mike.
Go ahead. Mike? Mike, can you? Oh.
If you haven't clicked on your microphone up in your, that's the other thing, just a reminder, there's a little sort of microphone box. If it's green, that means you can talk. If not, then that's why we can't hear you. And his is green.
Okay, so I do have one question in the chat box, and that is from Jennifer DeHollander. She's asking if you have any recommendations for specific software.
Ooh, so I'll give you a couple. We've worked with a lot of them, and it depends on your budget. So, you know, many people will tell you that Razor's Edge, which actually has just been purchased by Salesforce, is one of the best, but it's the Cadillac. It is very expensive. There's different modules that can grow as you go, and there's also a financial component called Financials Edge. It's wonderful. I love it. But here's what I'll tell you. There are other equally valuable ones that are not as expensive. Network for Good is excellent, and it is based on how many constituents or donors you have. So basically you pay depending on how many individuals that you're keeping records. I will tell you that if your organization is very social media savvy, please take a look at a product that Jay Love, actually many of you might know from a fundraising standpoint, but it's called Bloomerang. And we've put a couple organizations on that, and why it is so amazing. It's web-based, of course. Again, that one also is built depending how many constituents or records you have, and works really great with Stripe, for example. If you receive donations through your website on Stripe, But social media, it's amazing. So for example, if I'm your donor and I give you $25, great, I'm in your system. But if I have a Twitter handle, if I have a Facebook profile, LinkedIn, whatever my social is, you can put that in there, and anything that I do that might promote your organization, or if I want to, for example, put a fundraiser on Facebook, it will automatically inlay those actions. It will automatically make that part of my history. That's huge, because as your donors start to be more savvy, you can do mailings, you know how to reach them. So if you want to get at a message really fast and you have people that are on Facebook and they've opted in, Bloomerang is a pretty intuitive site. So those are just a couple. There are many that we work with. But those are probably the top 3 right now that I see a lot of my clients utilizing. What I would encourage you to do is, if any of you are not, most likely in your area, there's an organization called the Association of Fundraising Professionals. I would link up with that group and maybe see if you can attend one of their sessions on CRMs as well, or you can contact me directly. We actually have somebody that is well respected in the state of Florida. There's not many, unless they're with an actual software company, and that's all she does is she works with organizations such as yours to find the right CRM system. Her name is Holly Parrish. She's out of Lakeland. If you go to my website, you can actually click onto her and contact her directly and have a consultation with her. So.
Okay, great. Michelle, I have 2 more questions. The first one is from Mike. He says, we're a new museum with 1-year-old membership base. They have a board to speak of. Are they ready for a sustained development plan?
I would say the pieces that you would be ready for right now is just the stewardship piece and how you're going to get those members more involved, and then how you're going to look to upgrade them. I mean, that's the basic piece. I think secondly is the grants. You don't have to have staff to do grants anymore. I want to share with you all, do not be afraid to outsource. And the 3 areas that a lot of nonprofits are outsourcing, quite frankly, because, and I'm just saying this honestly, it's hard to find somebody with the expertise that can get the rate of return and you can keep them on staff. So marketing is typically outsourced these days. Grant writing is typically outsourced these days, and even CRM management can be outsourced these days, and financials. So I share that with you because grants require somebody that can really research things that can demonstrate you can, there's a high probability to grants, but they need to be able to see their value in the next 1.5 years. But grants is something that's a fairly safe rate of return. It is not a long-term strategy. It is not reaching out to individuals. So I would start number 1 with your membership and work on your stewardship steps to upgrade them. Because when they start upgrading, then you can look at maybe asking them for larger gifts. But I would look at grants as a way to do that. And then maybe if you're not on Facebook, maybe start doing some small Facebook campaigns. They're not expensive. But part of that's going to be knowing your database and knowing your donors. If you have a high population of senior givers, Facebook may not be for you. But if you are, for example, a children's museum, I mean, that's the best way right now for many children's museums to be raising money is through the social media and through parents. I hope that helps.
Thank you. And then Jessie has a question. She says, because we are a city-owned museum, but are supported by a nonprofit Friends org, any tips on how I can subtly teach donors that we really do need support for the nonprofit arm?
Right. Friends group are a blessing and curse. They're wonderful. I've worked with them at Sully Gardens. We're working with a client in Lakeland now. They're wonderful because they can be very powerful, but sometimes they can kind of run the show. So, and as a city-owned agency, there might be things you can accept and can't accept. So I think some of the great models you can look at from a fundraising perspective might be a direct mail campaign. One that not only the city could get behind because it raises awareness about an organization that they're funding, and also you can make sure they're on there so people know they're funding, but it's also something that, quite frankly, your friends group could get behind. So I would probably look at direct mail. If you do a special event, I would actually see if the friends group could do a special event on your behalf. That's huge because they bring the volunteer experience and you would basically be the beneficiary of that event. The more third-party type fundraisers you can do, you know, I know Walmart has different things they do, and there's certain food vendors, but if you can get groups like the Junior League, your friends group, some type of women's auxiliary group to be raising money on your behalf, where all you need to do is make sure the branding is solid and consistent. Maybe there's staff at the event and they give you the check. That's how I would particularly go about it. The systems are already in place.
Okay, great. I don't see any other questions popping up. I just want to thank you, Michelle, for giving us this wonderful presentation today. Again, if you haven't had a chance to download the handouts, go ahead and do that now. Make sure to get this information, Michelle's contact information. I can also send it in my follow-up email. I'm happy to do that with the survey. Did you have any final thoughts or?
If there was something that I didn't answer fully or maybe misunderstood, please do not hesitate to reach out. And if there's anything that comes up, I'm more than happy to make myself available.
Okay, great. Thank you all so much for attending. We really appreciate it. And we will see you next month.